Hi folks, you're with us today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the phrase that's come up now that's being used all across the Western world in what was clearly a centrally scripted globalist scam here about threats to democracy. There's been threats to democracy, and we see all the security services in Britain, the United States, even Australia and Canada and other Western countries. There are these omnipresent threats to democracy just everywhere. And where do these threats come from? The straight white males, the white people. These are white supremacists, and they're threatening democracy in the West. And these threats are do threats come from any other source or any other place, like, I don't know, Islamic terrorists or globalist globalist goons undermining democracy? No, they don't come. They come from damn white fucking fascist fucking Nazis. And who are these fascist Nazis? Straight white males. I mean, gee whiz, Trump voters. Trump voters are anyone that votes for Donald Trump is a fascist Nazi and a threat to democracy. Hoopah! But all these globalists who are busily tearing democracy to pieces, are they a threat to democracy in any way? No, they're the good guys. So they have this thing of whatever they do, tearing democracy to pieces, because that's the only way they can get the globalist project implemented. They then accuse everyone else of it. So if you complain about them, the globalists, tearing down democracy, then you're the one tearing down democracy because you point out that they're the ones doing it. I mean, like, whoa, what a mindfuck that is. So, and I was listening to a video of a number actually of people in the security and intelligence gathering services in Britain and the United States, and they're clearly reading from exactly the same script. There's almost no difference in the way they're assessing and depicting things. It's a bit like that. It's any sort of globalist propaganda. They try and standardize the talking points and standardize the propaganda so that they're all saying the same thing. And I noticed this with all globalist projects, whether they're when they were trying to destroy the family, for example. When I first came across the globalization sort of organization, if you will, and this is in the 80s, and I was able to, within one 24-hour period, doing a lot of traveling, you can read the newspapers in London, New York, Los Angeles, and all at once. And hold on a minute, this is the same article across three different newspapers. Is pre-internet, of course, three different newspapers, all owned by different organizations, that all seem to have almost exactly the same thing being said, even though it's vastly different societies, different racial mixes, different circumstances, different levels of wealth. You're claiming to have exactly the same thing, where there's all these evil white men, beating their wives and beating their children, and so on. And the best thing to do is for women to leave their husbands because, hey, you're going to get a free house and alimony and child supporting. Those sort of things. Exhorting women to leave the relationship, and because they're so oppressed, and really that's the same propaganda and architecture of the logic that the globalists have used to attack every facet and level and area of Western society. Starting in that case with families. Now, so I was listening to one just earlier on. There was it was an American intelligence service of some sort, and again, you couldn't sort of script this, without even needing to look at any background. Straight away, I knew that the person would be probably Jewish and with an activist background, as in Western society is evil and this sort of thing. So, and sure enough, it was a Jewish lesbian who was the lady who's putting this information out, that the biggest threat to democracy is straight white men. Now, the type of questioning was really, I thought, lackluster. She's been questioned by a Senate subcommittee or some political committee or committee made of politicians, and even the Republican politicians were, I thought, quite sloppy in their questioning. Okay, your report says, for example, the report says that white supremacist organizations are the biggest threat to democracy. Can you tell me the names of these organizations and the threats that they have either carried out or made or executed or whatever? Can you demonstrate? You're saying they're the biggest threat, therefore they must have done many things that have materially and physically threatened democracy. What are these things and who are these people? Now, that would be an obvious question that I would ask. For some reason, they don't. They're very tame and timid in their questioning. So what organisations are you referring to? Now, that's a fairly soft question, but okay, it's a valid question. So the woman gets asked, this Jewish lesbian, who hates white society but wants to extract all the benefits from it she can, and she's been appointed as a propagandist. She's not doing any fucking research or analysis or intelligence gathering. It's bullshit. Her job is to put out propaganda to undermine and destroy Western society to make it easier for the globalist takeover. Now, she's asked the question, who are these white? I don't know. Look, I'm not the researcher that did this, so I don't really know, but I'll get back to you on it later. Now, there's a couple of things there. She's turned up for the meeting to represent that organisation, but somehow knows nothing about the report or anything in it or any of the claims made. Now, that is a heavyweight claim to make. The biggest threat to American democracy comes from white people, white males, white supremacists, straight white males, white supremacists. That's a big, big claim to make. And if you're going to make a claim like that, you need to back it up. But she arrives completely unprepared. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, look, it wasn't me. I'm not the one. I didn't do it personally. Of course, you didn't do it personally. No one's saying you fucking did. You fuckwit. So she's ducks every question. None of the questions that are put to her. Again, softball. None of the questions are. She can't answer any of them, and really obfuscates and prevaricates and ums and ahs and haws and hums throughout the whole thing. Her animus to people that oppose the globalist project is quite clear, but that's all. Now, again, if I was doing the questioning, I would say, well, look, the people that have suffered the biggest reduction in standard of living and quality of life has been the white population of the West, because they've had to give way to all these different cultures and different languages and customs and habits. They've been the one required to give way. The others have not been required to assimilate. It's white people who have to stand aside, and due to affirmative action, they've been losing job opportunities and so on and so forth. So on that basis, white people have lost quite heavily. Do you think white people may be concerned about that? And would that not suggest that changes in policies were an issue here, if indeed that they're the big losers, as they quite clearly are? Now, are we also saying that because they're the big losers, that's just too fucking bad for them? And if they have any sort of queries about it, if they write letters to their congressman or they complain about it or they complain about it online, that we then call them terrorists and white supremacists? Is that the thing? So I'd have gone after them on that, but there wasn't that line of questioning. The line of questioning was, I thought, pretty tame in the overall scheme of things. Now, there's a centre-right government that was elected in another country, and the inference in this intelligence gathering was that they're kind of white supremacist, hey, very close to being Nazis, that sort of thing. And then the inference that anyone that doesn't vote, that does not vote for a pro-globalist candidate in an election, anyone who does not vote must be an enemy of democracy. So really, democracy is code speak for firstly, any politician that is in support of the globalist project is democratic. Any politician or any person or individual who questions or is against the globalist project is anti-democratic. So that's how they're doing the divide there. You disagree with globalization, you're anti-democratic. And if you're anti-democratic, it means you're a fascist. And if you're a fascist, it means you're a Nazi. If you're a Nazi, it means you're Hitler. And that's the absurd sort of architecture of rationale that they apply. But it's all the public services and so on have been handed over to this having this unified speakers one propaganda message. So and this is why they identify or pretend, they don't believe this, identify these say that it's all white supremacists and Nazis and so on and so forth. They're against the democratic, against democracy. Now, if you look at the multiple ways that democracy in the West is under assault, and the main part of that is not asking the people for their approval. If you want to have mass immigration, you have a fucking referendum. But the public and the democratic process is being bypassed at every level, and if a candidate the globalists don't like tries to get and stand for office, then they're attacked from all sides by the media, as President Trump is and has been, in order to make either legally harass them so they can't run, or their resources are exhausted, which is hard for someone as wealthy as President Trump. But or to just even in Australia, there was a candidate some years ago that warned about the mass immigration and we're going to be swamped by Asians, all that sort of stuff. And they on some very creative legal sort of mechanisms threw her in prison for things that pretty much every politician could be accused of. And threw her in prison, and only through a lengthy legal process was she able to get that very political legal verdict quashed. So this is where it's at now. So if white people attempt to organise in any way for any reason, organise to push back against globalisation, they will be declared as a white supremacist group. They will be infiltrated by agents who will do everything they can to create a false flag situation and to facilitate and organise some sort of event that can be used as propaganda against white people generally and against anyone who opposes globalization. Now, as well as the threat to democracy type thing, the underpinnings of democracy come from civic participation, people getting the right to vote, of course, and vote for candidates they select. But also it's the rule of law and due legal process. Now, the globalists, as we've learned around January 6th and other events, they're more than happy to arbitrarily arrest. They're more than happy to very selectively apply the law, whereas the rule of law means everyone is subject to the same law and held to that same standard. This is something the globalists can't do this. Remember, to implement the globalist project, they cannot have the rule of law and due legal process and citizens making decisions. Those three things are utterly incompatible with globalization. So they have to go. But while they're busily dismantling all these things or selectively applying them, they need a propaganda cover story. Well, it's not us, it's them. They're doing it. They're the threat to democracy. Look over there. Look over there. Don't look at what we're doing. Look at and really no one, whether it be in the Republican House, I suppose there's a few odd exceptions, but they go and chase after very specific line item issues rather than say, hey, you guys are stealing democracy from, for example, the mail-in voting due to the COVID thing. That again was, in my view, that's the removal of one of the central planks of democracy. That if you want to vote, you have to front with your ID on the big day and cast your vote. Anything outside of that can be subject to all sorts of creativities, and that is a loss of democracy. It's not a gain for democracy. And people who have no IDs and who can't prove that they're citizens, then they shouldn't be permitted to vote, because voting for your government is a right of citizens only. So the idea that people don't have to be citizens or don't have to prove they're citizens, the idea that's a denial of democracy. In fact, it's the reverse. The citizens get to choose, and the citizens choose their government. That's the very essence and basis of democracy. Now, we need to understand democracy was a form of power sharing between the citizenry and the elite and the various classes. Now, it never worked perfectly, and nor will it ever. So the idea that it must be 100% perfect or it's all crap and has to be trashed, that's nonsense. But it was a power sharing arrangement that if you look at all the democratic, the really democratic, non-corrupt democratic countries in the world, they're all rich countries, and that's no accident. Because when you have the rule of law and due legal process and the democratic electoral process, then people are far more confident in buying things, owning things, and investing in the future. And that's why you get, again, all the traveling I've done around the world on business, it amazed me how the people that in all these other poor countries, no one had confidence in the future. No one had confidence in the authorities or the institutions. The cultural ones maybe, like religious stuff, but no one had confidence in it. So no one invested in the future. People lived for the day. And this idea of if you're acquiring wealth, someone's going to take it off you. So why acquire wealth? There's no point in owning property, because the government or some heavyweight corrupt, mafia-style goon's just going to take it off you. So why bother? Why bother busting your ass? That sort of thing. So other than the criminal gangs, and even then you would keep your assets in cash and gold or something, and you'd have maybe a bolt hole property in another country, some rule of law country like in the West, but you wouldn't have it in your own country. And this refusal or inability or just complete lack of confidence in investing in the future was very much part of what makes those countries poor. Now, whether you can say that that's a result of arbitrary application of the law or this, that's a secondary issue. Not that it isn't important, it is, but that inability to have confidence in the future compared to the West, where on a relative basis at least there was many people having a lot of confidence in the future. You know that if you work hard and save money and buy your own house, that property is yours. But even that changed. Using divorce laws as the cover. The globalists were able to engineer massive transfers of wealth away from straight white males to as a dutiless entitlement to women, and they're doing the same now and taking wealth from white people and handing it over through mass immigration type osmosis to brown and black people who've contributed nothing and made nothing. But they're still stealing the wealth of white people to subsidize this. And this is all facets of loss of democracy being taken away. This idea that they're accusing that, well, the white people don't like being impoverished and having their rights taken away, so we'll just call them Nazis and white supremacists and say but really they're the only core of people that oppose and disagree with globalization, and that's what they mean by a threat to democracy. It's pure propaganda. You've been a tasteless today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.